What do we know? We know that this was never the intent of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. It says so right at that link. You go to that link, you can find the conference report. That's what explains what the legislators meant when they passed the law. It says specifically this: we do not intend, if a state or local government grants a permit in a commercial district, it must also grant a permit for a competitor's 50-foot tower in a residential district. It was never the intent to put 50-foot cell towers in neighborhoods. Maybe the House version wanted that, but not the Senate version. How do we know? It's in the conference report. Why do we listen to the conference report? Because the Supreme Court justices in 2005 in Abrams versus Palos Verdes cited this conference report for the basis for their decision to say it's cooperative federalism. Whatever the feds don't claim for themselves falls to the state and locals. Whatever the state doesn't claim for itself falls to the local counties and towns. This is you. You need to step up and say, hey, we don't have to do this. This is not what the whole thing was about. You just have to quickly say, no, not appropriate. We're going to stick with our macro towers. We'll put extra antennas on those. Hey, if you want to come to our commercial district, we'll work with you. But we don't have to come to the residential area. How do I know? That's exactly what my town did. August 2018. There will be no small cells in residential zones in Petaluma or Sausalito, California at all. All right? Because they passed the ordinance. It was simply done. They're not changing it because of the 2018 order. That 2018 order is presumptive. It means it's an opinion. It's not binding. It's not self-enforcing. That was admitted by the FCC themselves on February 10th of 2020 in court. You can listen to it right on my website, okay? Here is a workable vertical horizontal power recipe. It's called antennas 200 feet off the ground, at least 1,500 feet away, and then you don't have to regulate the power. Okay, they know how to build those. They've been building those for years, okay? Well, this is a disastrous recipe. 25, 50 feet off the ground, 10 to 20 feet from homes, and then thousands of watts. How many thousands? We see 20, 30,000 watts right there.
Can we, 1 minute and...
This is it.
Can you wrap up? Okay, awesome.
Here's the workable one. Hey, still come in, still build it. 25, 50 feet off the ground, 50 feet from a home, but 0.1 watt. Now we're talking. Now you have a solution. Now you're not prohibiting service. Now you're allowing phone calls. Well, what does that mean? It means that your video stuff comes through fiber optic to the homes. You do that by putting a sharing box. You see, it's the public rights of way, and there needs to be public benefit. And the public benefit is from sharing access to the fiber optic cables in the public right of way. I will rest there. That's the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you wrapping that up.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. All right, Stacy, has anybody come back in that had signed up to speak? Or are we all?
Oh, Dan just said that he's back and he would like to speak if there's time.
Okay, last one.
Dan,
Thank you, Dan.
And we don't have your last name, Dan. So Dan from Meridian.
Are you there, Dan?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's Peterman, Peterman.
Okay.
And
there you are. Okay.
I'm at work and was able to jot down some stuff I'd written that was online. So, I thank you for having me in here to speak today. Thank you, council members and everybody in the meeting. You guys are doing an awesome job. So I appreciate the airtime. But I just had some things with regard to the effects of 5G so that you can reference these and look up PubMed articles later with regards to what you're going to do about ordinances. Because there's been numerous recent scientific publications that shows that EMF does affect living organisms at levels well below most international and national guidelines. Those effects include increased cancer, cellular stress, increase in harmful free radicals, genetic damages, structural and functional changes in the reproductive system, learning disorders, and it has to do with something called the voltage-gated pathway of calcium. And these are actually right on the National Library of Medicine. These articles are peer-reviewed from experts around the world. And so one of the things is we know that the electromagnetic fields being generated by 5G have a high potential to change the cellular matrix of the human body. And they can change the morphological structure. And that, again, has to do with voltage-gated ion calcium levels. So that's something that you as council members can go and study and look at that. And in these articles, there's over 240 articles, or 240 scientists, that published articles, over 2,000 articles. And these scientists do arguably make up the majority of experts on the effects of EMF, or electromagnetic frequencies, on the body. So the data is out there, and I know there's a lot of conflicting information, but honestly, a lot of the articles we find in magazines and elsewhere are really just hit pieces. When we want to study, we need to do the due diligence and go and find these peer-reviewed articles that are right there on PubMed, right there on the National Library of Science website, and they're all peer-reviewed. And so we do know that there are effects from these towers, not just being up close to them, but from a distance. And I think we find when people do know the reality of these things, the majority of people don't want them. So that's all for today.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Spears, I would like to give you the opportunity to answer any questions if you have any additional information that you would like to share with the group before we close the public hearing.
Madam President, members of the commission, I don't believe that I have anything additional at this time to share. I would stand for any questions that may have arisen.
Okay. I just have one here for you, Mr. Spears, before we close. The 20-foot setback, I understand the rationale that was used in coming up with that. Is there any type of leniency in regards to this ordinance on expanding that, or what is the...
Madam President, well, first of all, the 20-foot rule is dependent upon the appropriate land use jurisdiction having consented, and so that is the first concern in that as whether or not there would be a leeway.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Spears.
So, Madam President, Steve Price, I'd like to add a couple of points.
Yes. Mr. Price, welcome. Go right ahead.
Thank you. So, not many people from out of state really understand the difference between a general purpose government and a special purpose government. We don't have the same police powers or mandate that municipals or the counties have in terms of the general welfare and safety and aesthetics over the community. We generally look at our mandate as transportation safety and safety within the public right-of-way. We have, in terms of the locational standards, we have looked across the country. There's several states that have state legislation in place that's similar to what we're trying to achieve today. Idaho to date has not adopted a law. And if that ever changes, the law, if the Ninth Circuit has a different ruling, we're not controlled by the DC Circuit, but if the Ninth Circuit ruling changes the law, there's also two pieces of legislation in Congress right now that are going in different directions, but if the law ever changes, obviously we would have to change our ordinance, and more than happy to do that. But the locational standards we're trying to meet just in terms of what the federal mandate is, in terms of reasonableness, is trying to meet what other jurisdictions are allowing. But again, with the cities having control and with the police power, they can create greater distances in terms of location because they have the police power and the jurisdictional mandate to do so. So we're simply creating a minimum standard, but the cities would be able to come in and make individual determinations based upon locations, individual locations on a case-by-case basis that may require different locational standards for that particular location. And that is why, a very important reason why the land use jurisdictions need to participate in those decisions. To date, just about, to my knowledge, all of the locations have gone through review by the City of Meridian and the City of Boise, and the cities want that authority to be able to do that, and that's why we also included it. So again, if from now, if you adopt the ordinance today, we most certainly will be watching the federal law, any additional information and guidance, or if the state adopts a new law, but we would amend the ordinance. More than happy to do that, but we feel that we have to be consistent with the existing federal law is, and at least get something going in terms of the many applications that we have waiting. Right now, we don't have that, and we want to make sure that the land use agencies have the ability as a requirement to define what the standards are for the location of a particular site.
Madam President?
I have a question as well.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yeah, I have a question for Steve as well, and it's probably just to clarify something in my mind. I mean, we have this 20-foot rule, but I can see right off the bat that 20 feet away from where something would be in our right-of-way might be already impacting something we have no control over, correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, what we're doing right now is making it absolutely certain that a land use agency has to weigh in on this, because we're making a decision that we have no business telling them how to use that property, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ray, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Arnold.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Price about how procedurally how we would continue this hearing from today. Personally, I am not prepared to adopt an ordinance today. I understand the need to do so. However, I'm not prepared to do that. There are a number of unanswered questions. There were some questions raised by the first speaker. I believe her name may have been Lynette. I'd like to hear answers from staff to the questions raised by that speaker. I would also like to have some response from our legal department to the presentation and some of the issues raised by Paul, I believe it was Gavin. So I'm not prepared to adopt an ordinance today. We've also had a number of people who have asked that this be deferred to a night meeting, and frankly, I think that would be appropriate to allow opportunity for the public to weigh in on this. So how would we do that procedurally? Would we need to continue this hearing to a date certain and not close the public hearing, or how would we handle that?
Well, we've done that in both instances. We've deferred it to a date certain. You have the ability to do that, or sometimes even when we do that, we redo the public hearing notice as a continuation. We can do that, but I'll remind you, under the federal rules, we have specific and very defined time as to when we have to process the applications that are before us. Those applications, with any delay, would have to go forward without any regulatory guidance. But if the commission wants to defer it, we most certainly can do that, and you can do that to a date certain, and we will go ahead and republish that in the news as well as open meeting law that that's what's going to happen.
Okay, then a follow-up question. When could we have a night meeting? I understand that logistically there are going to be some challenges, but I do think it's important that we find a way for people to be able to participate in a public meeting. This Zoom thing, frankly, it just isn't working very well. I think, we have to have some creative solution for people to be able to come to our meeting and address us in person. Now, I don't know if that means we have people wait in their cars until they're called to come in and speak, or logistically how we're going to do that, but there has to be a creative solution to provide a better opportunity for the public to participate. So,
Well, the governor's order does not end until June 26th in terms of gathering restrictions. And so the meeting would have to occur subsequent to that date. Our next night meeting isn't until July. However, the commission has the authority to change any day meeting after June 26th to a night meeting to accommodate this particular agenda item.
well, then,
Madam President?
Commissioner Baker.
Yes, thank you. I think we're getting, right now, we have applications out there that have none of these restrictions on them. Theoretically, they could put a tower or a little cell 5 feet from somebody's house. So I'd ask Steve, how many applications are there out there right now that will expire before, say, the end of June, or June 17th?
Madam President, I think we'd have to clarify that with Development Services staff, but we know that there are 56 in pre-application and 60 in the process.
So if the more we delay, the more likely it is these little cells will be put wherever without any input from basically ACHD's requirements or from the land use agency.
Well, if I can, Madam President and Commissioner Baker, that's not completely accurate. We've been working well with service providers, but the one thing is for sure, that the applications would not be subject to the local locational standards or the city's input. We can't tell you exactly because the applications have come in at different times, and the federal clock has started at different times for each one of those applications.
Okay, thank you. And I understand that the law is always in flux, sort of. This Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996 has obviously been out there for 24 years. There are challenges to it. Is there one before the Ninth Circuit that would have any impact on us?
Yes, there is, and the 10th Circuit has consolidated their cases with the 9th Circuit, and so there's, I believe, 2 cases, maybe 3 that are being reviewed by a 9th Circuit panel. And that appeal, I believe, started a year ago, and they're in the briefing stage.
And what was the underlying facts of that, just briefly?
Oh, well, I don't have the exact underlying facts, but the central issue is that they believe that the federal law is arbitrary and capricious as to the state and local's ability to basically not have input into the review process for the location of these small cell units.
Okay, well, I don't understand then. This ordinance puts into place standards for review, so
Well, there are other jurisdictions and cities, a conglomerate of cities, at least within California, challenged the federal law, arguing that they are not subject to it because but the rule within the federal law is arbitrary and capricious and basically is undermining their authority to impose locational standards.
but here we would be imposing locational standards under this ordinance, right?
Right. Well, we're trying to, we're not challenging that authority. We don't want the litigation. And so we're trying to comply with the federal law until there's a decision that clarifies what is already being challenged.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple of comments. Obviously, we are trying to fill a void by developing these standards. I think that's important, whatever they end up being. At the end of the day, it ends up with the city making the decision as to the placement of these devices. However, I do feel we've got a lot of unanswered questions out there, and we did get a lot of good information today. So I don't think we can defer something indefinitely to when we can get back together in large groups. Like Mr. Price just said, the governor's order goes through, what is it, the 26th of June? But you know, I would not be averse to getting some answers to some of these questions as well. So I would like to maybe talk through that process. I don't know if does a week give us enough time to have answers to some of these questions. I just don't want them to go out into a vacuum. I think everybody put a lot of time and effort into their research and their comments today. So,
Madam President, I would at least request
Price.
2 weeks to make sure that we're thorough in reviewing all the questions. We don't know the effort that's going to be required to answer those questions, but we're happy to do so.
okay, all right. I just we got a lot of earnest testimony, and you know I took a lot of notes, and I would like to have a little bit more information, and I would like us to be responsive to the questions that were brought up today. So I think it would be prudent to continue this. But back to the procedural question, do we leave the public hearing open then until the time that we would come back, say in 2 weeks?
I'm prepared to make a motion, Commissioner May, when it's appropriate.
Madam President, if you're going to if you leave the public hearing open, then you can defer it to a date certain. If you close, excuse me, I got that backwards. If you close the public hearing but keep the meeting open, you can defer that to a definite date, and then we can provide the answers to the questions to the commission. If you don't, if you close the public hearing, my preference would be to renotice and reschedule the meeting to a date certain.
Okay. Well, I think that would be a reasonable option for the 2 weeks, and then everybody is properly noticed and we've got some answers, and then we are able to make a informed decision going forward. But I do feel strongly that this is very much needed. It's critical. I think we need to fill that void. We need to have the ordinance. We need to have the guardrails, if you will, placed on this type of situation. So I do feel it is necessary, it is critical, but like we need to do it right. And so I would be in favor of that as well.
So Commissioner May, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Madam President, may I make
Okay.
some comment?
Oh, okay.
Can I make a motion and then
There
we
are-
can discuss it?
That's, go ahead. You, we can entertain a motion if that's where she was going, and then we can have the discussion.
Okay, I move that we keep the public hearing open and continue this item to June 24th, and that we make that a night meeting. Am I going to get a second to my motion?
Now, I think that's well, is there a second? Are you,
Madam
proposing
President,
it?
just
Oh,
as a
I'm sorry.
reminder,
Is
the
there a
governor's
second?
order does not expire until June 26th.
Yes, and I understand
Okay,
that.
all right.
But we don't have to have too many people in the auditorium. We can establish some sort of system for people to wait in their cars until they're called in to testify. I don't, and I'm not sure we're bound
I
by the
think that's
governor's
too
order anyway.
confusing.
We're a public agency, but.
yeah.
That is way too confusing, and,
Yeah.
and
I think
how would anybody know what was going on?
Yeah,
in the
I
meeting?
don't want to complicate this any more than it already is. I think I would not like to have a motion predicated on the ability to bring people into the building. We just don't know. It's too tenuous right now what's going on.
Okay, I'll amend my
I-
motion then to make it July 1st, which is the first Wednesday in July.
Personally, I think the 2 weeks was sufficient.
Yeah.
Unless we have an amended motion or a second to Commissioner Arnold's motion. And I guess we're doing this in the public hearing because we are considering whether or not we're going to continue it.
I do think it's important to keep the public hearing open.
I would agree with that.
Madam President, I'll make a substitute motion, and then Mr. Hanson can make any discussion he needs, and that is that we keep the public hearing open and we defer the decision on this issue until June 3rd, which is 2 weeks.
That's the 2 weeks?
Yes, 2 weeks.
Okay. Is there a commissioner that would like to second that?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Baker. We have a second by Commissioner Arnold. Any discussion?
Well, Madam
Commissioner
President,
Hanson?
doesn't sound like the motion makers want to debate. My comments really don't relate to that particular motion. I've heard a lot of evidence today, and I've been reading this proposed regulation since it was posted. And today, and very likely in 2 weeks, I would be voting against it. So there's a huge problem in this, and it's an Ada County problem, because the law was written and the FCC's order was written with the assumption that the local government to whom it refers has authority over land use, health and safety, aesthetics, historic habitability of residences. We have been warned time and time again against what's often called mission creep, when this highway department, this highway agency, extends beyond and starts to delve into areas over which it has no expertise. And this is far beyond mission creep. It is duplicating what the cities are or aren't doing, but their responsibility is to regulate the health and safety of their own citizens. I understand cities do want to incentivize fiber optics. How does this supersede that? They would have to act on every single one of these. HHD uses level of service of traffic at peak hours, traffic counts. We have a very detailed pavement conditioning index to determine the quality of the asphalt or the concrete. We use crash data. We have no measurements for public health. We do not hire occupational therapists or health engineers to evaluate these kinds of things. And yet that language is in our proposed regulation. Our proposed ordinance would require us to do that. Or sit passively and hope that the city does or doesn't do that. Whether it has a regulatory framework adopted yet, we would move forward on that. We have no measurement based on economic value, whether that's the company that's asking for this and feels an entitlement to it, or whether that's a business that is affected by it. We don't have metrics to measure historic or otherwise, other than the one reference to you happen to be registered on the historic registers list. The cities are regulating and supporting historic preservation far beyond just those buildings that are on the historic register list. We even use this term habitability of a residence, and so we have to go in and determine whether a residence. We look at a building, oh, it's a garage, looks like a garage. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize someone was living there. We made an assumption about habitability. I think this is a duplication, and of course it's only an Ada County issue that can be resolved. The master agreement could be made with set up and made with the local government, the general purpose government, the city or county. And if they don't have a framework for it, then there ain't no master agreement yet. ACHD then simply plays a role like we do in the approval of developments. Oftentimes, we are a recommending body. And as long as they don't interfere with our facilities, our signal poles or access on the sidewalks, we would have something to say about that. But otherwise, we don't get into any of the health, aesthetics, historic. This is a highway agency. We use very different tools. Listening to the information as a independent reviewer of this body, if someone were to come to me and say, okay, we want you to evaluate different radio waves that these different types of facilities are putting out, we have no tools within our own agency to evaluate that. Now, the cities potentially have that. The health districts, maybe they have that. I think this needs to be sent back to the drawing board. It needs to be set up as an ordinance that, because Ada County is very unique and in the entire country, that we would then assign that authority, whatever authority we might have for developing the master license agreement, to the city. They would go through all of this public process to determine whether it's in the best health, interest, safety, welfare, economic development of their city. If they want to put in incentives for fiber optics and other things and limit the amount of development of small microwaves, if they want to restrict residence areas, they can do that. And they do that on the front end rather than as a reaction to us, because we are, as the legal counsel says, we are a special purpose district for transportation. We are a special purpose district for transportation. This is way, way outside of our jurisdiction, and we should not be attempting to develop a licensing process with a telecommunications firm, simply because of the unique circumstance in Ada County that we have authority over the right-of-ways. We do, in fact, regularly delegate that if there's some question, delegate that to the land use agencies, to the cities and counties. They regulate it. I mean, we basically did that with the scooters. The cities came up with their own ordinances, and we've largely deferred to the cities. We've done that with respect to parking on public streets. There's lots of things we've done that for. This cries out that the general purpose governments need to take the lead. If they don't have a system in place, and presumably they do, because there's cell towers on private property that they regulate. There's cell towers on city properties, presumably, that they regulate. If they don't have a system in place, then we've got to wait until they do.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. And I think that and the questions and the presentations that we've had today, all that can figure into this reevaluation. We're hitting the pause button here today, so hopefully we can make some progress, and I'm confident that we will over the next couple of weeks until we have the next meeting. So thank you very much for your input. Mr. Price, so we just move on. We do not, after we take our vote on this motion, we'll just leave the public hearing open if it passes, and we'll just go from there. Commissioners, you have a motion before you. All in favor? The deferral of the motion? Yeah.
Aye.
Aye. Nay? Any nays?
Nay.
Nay, I'm ready to vote it down.
Okay. Motion carries to keep the public hearing open and defer it to date certain. What was that date, Commissioner Baker? I'm sorry.
June 3rd.
Okay.
June
And I
3rd.
would,
Motion. Commissioner Arnold. Motion carries.
I would ask that during that time that we do get some answers to the questions that were raised today.
Oh.
I would also like to see copies of any ordinances that have been adopted by the local land use agencies with regard to the placement of cell towers. I want to know what position they've taken and what they're doing with these.
Absolutely. So everybody needs to buckle in and do their homework the next couple of weeks. And I would request too, any of our speakers today, if you have some additional information that you've shared with us, if you could send that so that all the commissioners have access to that rather than just the view that we saw today. And again, I sincerely thank all of you for your input today. So we definitely want to do right by all of our citizens, and we appreciate your time and effort. Thank you.
Can we take a break?
Yes, let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll continue on with our agenda. Thank you, everyone.
There's, I think that's your fault.
it's other ways. You gotta learn it's other ways. Entering anyway, because you have a waiting room. Yeah. The other thing was.
What else do we have today?
Commissioner May, the commissioners are in position. Commissioner May, the commissioners are back in position.
That's what I do.
Yeah, you could have moved this stuff before, Mom. Sorry.
We're keeping that living room?
Everyone.
There we go.
Commissioner May, the commissioners are in position.
Thank you, Director Wong. All right, moving on in our agenda. The next item we have is Cedar Brook, request for approval, modification from policy. If everybody could still mute their, or Stacy, if you could mute, please. We'll turn it over to Dawn Battles, planner with Development Services. Welcome, Dawn.
Madam President, can we switch the camera so we can see the speaker at the podium? Or, okay, she's going to
I
do
think,
that.
yeah, so we can see her presentation. Oh. So is Mindy doing it or Dawn?
Mindy.
Okay, welcome, Mindy.
Let's try that.
But that's only our view. I'll use this. Which one of these is?
Full screen.
Yeah.
Let's try that again.
I'm going to go help Mindy. Because we don't see that, Mindy. You need to share your screen first. There we go.
But it won't let it. Won't let her share that way. So there's that. When you go into here,
Madam President, Commissioners, for the record, Mindy Walsh, Development Services. And before you today, we have a decision briefing for the Cedar Brook subdivision.
Thank you.
Again, for the record, Mindy Walsh, Development Services. And before you, we have a decision briefing for the Cedar Brook subdivision. So today we'll have a brief project overview and a discussion of the request to remove a north-south collector roadway from the master street map and staff's recommendation. So this is an annexation, rezone, and preliminary plat application to allow for the development of 330 single-family residential lots, 38 common lots, and 4 driveway lots on 119 acres. The site has frontage on Amity Road and Linder Road, both classified as minor arterial roadways, and this development is estimated to generate approximately 3,334 trips per day, with 330 of those occurring during the PM peak hour. The applicant and staff are in agreement on all findings for consideration and site-specific conditions of approval, and this application is before you due to a request to modify the master street map. The master street map shows a north-south collector roadway abutting the site's west property line. Typically, the applicant would be required to construct the roadway as shown on the master street map. However, after discussions with the City of Meridian, staff has recommended a modification to the master street map to remove the collector roadway shown at the site's northwest property line. It's the segment of collector that's in the red circle. Staff's recommendation is due to discussions with the City of Meridian held during the pre-application meetings. Meridian determined that the collector roadway isn't necessary to support the land uses shown on their future land use map, which designates the area south of the site as low-density residential. Additionally, construction of the roadway would be difficult due to the parcel configuration south of the site. The request to remove this collector roadway was proposed to be included as part of a full master street map update anticipated to be before you this fall. However, we received the development application ahead of that process. Connectivity in the area would be achieved through local street connections and stub streets to adjacent parcels. The City of Meridian staff has recommended the removal of the collector roadway, and the application meets ACHD policies and standards. This application was before Meridian's Planning and Zoning Commission on May 7th, and they recommended approval to City Council, and that hearing will be held on June 9th. Staff recommends approval of the staff report as written, and I'll stand for any questions.
Madam President,
Thank you,
I have,
Mindy. Commissioners, any questions?
yes, Madam President, I do.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
I've just got a few that are mostly curiosity questions. Mindy, what was the rationale behind not requiring 2 access points for this development?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, because Linder Road is a minor arterial roadway, we have access management standards which say that access to arterials should be limited to what's actually needed to serve the site. This site can be adequately served by 1 access point, a collector roadway. There will be 2 secondary emergency access points onto Linder Road, and those will be gated or bollard at the direction of the Meridian Fire Department. So there's one up here north of the road, and then there will be one down here south of the road.
Okay. On page 4, there's some right-of-way constraints referred to for the left-hand turn issue. What are those?
Right-of-way constraints regarding off-site intersections.
I believe so, because it would have been the northbound turn up there on Linder. Yes, the left, yeah.
So I have on page 4 talking about the Linder and Victory Road intersection. And at that intersection, we have significant right-of-way constraints that have prohibited
Yes.
it from being improved.
Okay.
Yeah, there's houses on the 2 northern corners that are right at the intersection, and I'm trying to remember what the south approaches look like right now, but I believe there's homes pretty close to the intersection as well, and we would need to acquire all right-of-way from all of those intersections to make an improvement.
Any idea at this point if we need to purchase the home on the northeast corner?
Commissioner Goldthorpe, I don't know, and that's not a decision that is made through development services. It would be made through the project.
Oh, let's see. I guess I don't have this third question, so I'll go to 4. Do you know when the design phase is going to be for the Linder Road improvements from Overland to Amity?
I do not, but perhaps Mr. Wallace, are you familiar?
And has anybody even begun working on it with a crayon or a pencil?
My apologies, Commissioner. Dave Wallace, Deputy Director of Plans and Projects. Could you repeat the question, please?
Oh, when is the design phase going to begin for the Linder Road improvements? And I'm specifically from Overland to Victory, then Victory to Amity.
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Now, let's see. I'm a little concerned about what I see happening in that area with regards to the road usage and the need to provide better and more for modes of traffic, meaning bikes and pedestrians, but I'll get to that probably a little later in the motion section. But there's a lot of vehicles traveling at a very high rate of speed there. If you see the northeast corner of the drawing that's in front of us, the home there at that corner used to be owned by Congressman Fulcher, and a couple years ago we had a request from him to put the radar trailer out there for a while and determine whether people were going at Mach 1 or Mach 3, and we got a pretty good idea of the speeds that we're going, and I'm kind of concerned there where Cedar Brook comes in, if there is going to be enough room from the crest of that hill for people going 60 miles an hour to be able to stop when someone's making that left-hand turn, and if not, if we can put a warning signal or sign up there further to the north to let people be aware that they're about to do something dumb.
President Maine, Commissioner Goldthorpe, we did have staff go out and verify the site distance yesterday. So this is a picture from approximately the intersection of where Cedar Brook will intersect Linder and looking north, and they determined that there was adequate site distance, and the applicant's engineer provided us some additional data, and they have 900 plus feet of site distance north of the proposed roadway and 1,000 plus feet to the south, and based on the current posted speed limit, 555 feet is required.
Okay. So what you're saying is that you'd have to be blind not to be able to see someone making a left turn. In my words. Don't answer that. Oh,
I also will add that they're gonna, the applicant's gonna construct a dedicated right turn lane at that intersection, so that should help.
okay, cool. Is there sufficient room in the proposed, I think it's 96 feet of right-of-way, to include buffered bike lanes on the collector as well as the 2 arterials?
President May, Commissioner Goldthorpe, the 96 feet of right-of-way accommodates ACHD standard 5-lane arterial, which would not have buffered bike lanes, nor would those be on the collector. I think design issues like that are typically contemplated with the project, and through development, we're just acquiring right-of-way based on the master street map typologies. If those typologies were to change, then certainly that's something we would be doing, but they haven't changed at this time.
Okay. That was the reason at the beginning of the meeting, before the meeting, that I was asking about for Edinson to arrange a visit so we could look at the master street map where it concerns this and some of the other north-south especially. Thank you.
Madam President?
Commissioner Baker.
Yes, thank you. Mindy, what was the reason that Meridian didn't want to have the mid-mile collector?
President May and Commissioner Baker, they didn't think that it was necessary to serve the traffic that would be generated by this development south of here. It's a little bit easier to see on this map. So we have a mid-mile collector down, and it kind of goes over to accommodate these houses, and then intersects Amity. And it's something that we talked about several times, numerous times before the applicant made application, and they were pretty hard and fast that they didn't feel like it was necessary.
The city or the applicant?
The city.
Okay, because I have to tend to disagree because, 10 Mile has the overpass, and, CUNA's building out. We saw under last year when we looked at all of the numbers of plats that were even, the number of plats that were already in existence but not built out were extremely high in this area.
The list.
10 Mile is, like I said, is in Linder. Meridian wants an overpass at Linder. If Meridian gets the overpass at Linder in conjunction with the 10 Mile overpass, this area is just ripe for development. I don't understand why we get rid of a mid-mile collector. We know this area is going to develop. It may not be today. It may not be tomorrow. It may be 10 years. It may even be sooner than 10 years. But it just seems like we would put that in because these quadrants are all going to develop at some point. Mm-hmm. And it would be, and right now, if you look at it, to look at the plat, I'm trying to find it on my thing, people are going to be cutting through. That's what's going to happen is people are going to cut through these neighborhoods instead of on a collector. So, I understand that they would have to go back probably and redesign it because they would be responsible for building part of that collector, or maybe they wouldn't redesign it. Maybe they would just build the collector anyway. I don't feel good about getting rid of the mid-mile collector. I just don't.
Madam President?
I would agree with that as well, Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Goldthorpe?
Well, thanks, President May. I was just going to give you a little bit more color on what's there at the left south corner. There is a large old dairy farm that's there, and then the homes that are just to the south of the development are all on an acreage, and they're all very expensive, well-built, beautiful, some estates homes. And so where the mid-mile collector was proposed would probably be a perfect location for it.
Madam Chairman, instead of going straight, instead of just going straight down to Amity, take that blue line and go straight down to Amity.
That blue line could go straight down to Amity, yes.
Oh no! So there is obviously a location.
There we go.
That could do that. Either this proposed one or just going straight south. I like I said, I don't feel good about taking away the collector at this point in time.
Thank you.
Madam
Do you have
President?
any other, Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, I would just follow up. I think I agree with Commissioner Baker's comments.
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask Mindy to follow up. Actually, in the staff report, it's some real troubling language on page 9 that says after removal of the north-south collector there south of Harris, that it, quote, connectivity will be achieved through local street connections. That's a big red flag for me to say that a collector's function will be fulfilled by local streets. And the only local street right now is this Rustler's Place, which has, houses on it. Can't seems to know what they are. But what local streets? What local streets will it be? Are they streets that are yet to be built, or are they ones that are already there?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, it would be from streets that would be constructed as these area parcels develop. And Commissioner Goldthorpe raised a good point regarding the homes that are built on the adjacent parcels south and west of here is one of the primary reasons my Meridian felt this was reasonable to remove. We do have a stub street that will be constructed to the south in this location. This will extend north as a collector, and we're looking for opportunities to extend the collector to the west. But because of those large lot platted subdivisions, the extension of the roadways may be a little bit difficult in the future. There's also a stub street right here to the north.
If I could just follow up on that map, it looks like on Cedar Brook, that point, if you used part of Cedar Brook as the north-south as well as the east-west collector, that traffic would go right by that clubhouse, right? So the main attraction in the entire neighborhood where people are walking to would be the area through which 2 collectors would be. Is that correct?
That is correct. The section of Cedar Brook directly abutting the clubhouse is planned to be divided with a center landscape island and 20-foot wide travel lanes.
Yeah, it's still, so the question I have a great deal of reservation about just relying on future roads. And particularly as there's a school site just to the west of here. So there's going to be a lot of people driving to and from there, and they're going to be wanting to use, they should be provided collector roads, and we should not be providing connectivity through local roads where a collector road was contemplated. My next question is, there's a reference to the fact that it would be difficult to construct. Now, this collector, this north-south collector road has been on the master street map for a long, long time. Don't we evaluate the difficulty of collector road topography when we first designate them? Why is the difficulty of constructing it something new, or?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, this is not new. Particularly when the master street map was first developed, they are lines on a map, and often we've recommended that they be removed to topography or constructability issues, parcel configurations, and look for opportunities for rerouting the roadway. So they're not right on the line, but different opportunities like the one that's before us today to provide the east-west connectivity through the parcel. It just depends. Every road on the master street map we look at on a case-by-case basis with each development application.
So is there a huge grade difference between that point at the north and that point on Amity where the collector road would be? What's the
I'm not
elevation?
sure that it's really grade. The city of Meridian was more concerned with how do you construct a road with all of these large lot acre subdivision that's already been subdivided, and then these are quite large homes, as Commissioner Goldthorpe alluded to, and how do you construct that road through there, either as we have shown, or does it need to meander over and cut through this area? There's lots of difficulties with constructing a road through an already developed area.
True, but the burden would then shift to areas that are the smaller, all those residences who would be living in this new subdivision. I have a question about that, about the width of Cedar Brook as it goes through that subdivision. It starts out from the east at 42 feet, and then later on becomes 36. And I can't understand why it would change in width, and I realize you have a median strip, but if the speed limit is 25 and it's going to be used as a principal cut through east-west to get to that school, why not 36 or less along the entire way? I realize 36 is a collector street standard, but why wider?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, the Meridian Fire Department requires 20 feet of pavement on either side of center landscape islands so they can get their trucks through there. So regardless of how wide the island is in this area, they should be 10 to 12 feet wide. Then we would have the two 20-foot travel lanes and then the extra foot for the gutter pan before the curb, and then it would transition to the standard 36-foot wide collector.
What speed management features are going to be required to ensure that people drive 25 when they go through there?
At this time, staff hasn't recommended any traffic calming features on the collector roadway.
That's an issue. It looks like because there's so many attractants, especially with the new school, the clubhouse, and the density of those housing lots, people will be crossing that collector at many points. So that's a big issue, a big issue to me. So those are my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Any other questions for Mindy?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Arnold?
I just wanted to follow up. Commissioner Hanson raised an issue that was a red flag for me as well when it says that connectivity will be achieved through local street connections. That's a problem. So I think we need to figure out how to get the collector, either keep the collector that's on the master street map or reconfigure it in a manner that works, because I don't think the connectivity with the local streets is going to be something that's workable.
Yeah,
Madam President,
agree. We don't need to be pushing traffic through those local roads. Commissioner Goldthorpe?
I would actually agree with that and would think that the collector should head north from Cedar Brook.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll just add one more point, and that is if we get rid of that southern part of the collector and the area to the north has not been developed, there'll be tremendous pressure to get rid of the northern part of that collector as well. So I think it behooves us to make that a mid-mile collector and preserve it.
I think so too.
I would agree. Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Any other comments? Thank you, Mindy. Stacy, did we have anybody, we
Yes.
did get a couple of letters regarding this. Do we have anybody that would like to?
Sonia from Kittleson and Associates is wanting to
Okay.
testify as applicant.
Okay, very good.
Madam President,
Good afternoon.
one other thing that I probably should do before we hear this particular testimony, and that is
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
admit that both Debbie Weiler and her husband David and Kelly Biss, who's a neighbor there, that we've had very, very general conversations about this over the months, and I informed them that they should just get involved with their neighborhood meetings, which I guess they did.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, now we'll hear from Kittleson. Welcome.
Thank you, President May and Commissioners. Stacey, it looks like you'll be sharing the slides. Do you want to run it that way as opposed to have me sharing my content? I'm fine either way, whatever works best. But since you have it up on the screen, I'll just go with your slides and ask you to switch to the next slide. So thank you, Commissioners. I am here on behalf of Toll Brothers, the applicant. Again, Sonia DeLyden with Kittleson and Associates, 101 South Capitol Boulevard, Suite 600 in Boise. The application is in front of you today. We want to thank staff for working with us. We are in agreement with all of the conditions of approval and appreciate staff's time and effort on this project. Just a few things to highlight, or maybe even re-highlight based on what Mindy said, and I'll have you go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is the development site plan before you. Again, the properties in the northwest quadrant of the Linder-Amity intersection. The application is for 330 single-family units. I will just have you note that the traffic study completed for the project assumed 365. So the analysis in that study is actually slightly conservative based on where the site plan ended up. Next slide, please. And then this slide has a few animations. So if you could click the first one, this just summarizes the conditions of approval. So first, the development will be doing half-street improvements along the entire site Linder Road frontage. So that does include providing that additional right-of-way and doing half-street improvements to add multimodal facilities along that stretch. And then if you can click next, please, the same as for its frontage along Amity Road. And next, please. As Mindy highlighted, there will be a exclusive right turn lane provided along Linder Road at the site at the key access along Linder. And then next, please. I do want to highlight that the development will be paying, upon build out of all the lots, will pay in excess of $1 million in Ada County Highway District traffic impact fees. We're highlighting that because if you can switch to the next slide, those fees can be used by the district to go towards 5-year work plan and also CIP projects. And this slide just highlights that there are quite a few projects in the area that are planned, that although the development does not trigger the need for these projects, these are planned in the future. So I just wanted to show that. It includes widening on 10 Mile Road, as well as 2 intersections on 10 Mile Road in the 5-year work plan. This may answer, or at least provide additional information for Commissioner Goldthorpe's questions. On Linder, the widening from Overland down to Victory is scheduled in the 2021 to 2025 CIP. It's not included in the 5-year work plan that goes to 2024, but the way it's currently scheduled, it looks like it will happen around that 2025 time period. The widening south of Victory on Linder is scheduled for the 2031 to 2035 CIP. And then you can see in the pink highlights the improvements along Victory, which are scheduled in the 2026 to 2030 CIP. So next slide, please. The site distance at the access was asked. I will just highlight again what Mindy highlighted. At the access point, they're based on the posted speed, which is 55 miles per hour. 555 feet of site distance is required at that intersection. To the north, there's over 900 feet of site distance before you get impacted by the curve. And then in the south, it's over 1,000 feet of site distance. So we are very comfortable there's adequate site distance for the turning movements in and out of that access. And next slide, please. For those of you who may have delved deep in the traffic study and noticed at the time of the study they were proposing the 2 access points to Linder before conversations with ACHD about access management. Just wanted to highlight the operations of the single access point, excuse me, that will serve the property well, operating at level of service C and a VC ratio of less than 0.5. So those are the key slides I have to highlight. I do just want to follow up briefly on the discussion of the mid-mile collector. The developer is a little bit caught between a rock and a hard place here, between what the direction and the desires of the City of Meridian and those expressed by the ACHD Commission. I will state we're willing to work in either direction, but there is conflicting desires on both behalf. So with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions. the development team is also dialed into this meeting and can answer questions as well. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions?
I have a question.
Commissioner
Madam
Hanson?
President. Yeah. Sonia, thank you. One question I wanted to ask, I forgot to ask Mindy, but I'm sure you're in a better position. So there's a little segment of Harris that was originally designated going to be connecting where Brookland connects with it, and then it would continue on west towards the school site. But it would need to jog in order to get around some buildings just to the west. So rather than your client dedicating that land, what you're proposing is that the adjacent landowner to the north would have to dedicate that land for that connection over to the school, and it would just be a T intersection. But that largely means that little slip of property that landowner would have less value. Why not? Why couldn't the Harris go to the west and then jog north to get around those buildings and then head on? That certainly would provide a little less of a speedway to the school. A nice turn right there would be probably appropriate to offer some speed control. So what's the rationale behind shifting the obligation onto the other landowner to carry this future collector? And is there discussion with them about what that does to that little strip of land to the south of the future collector that might be largely useless because it's too small?
Thank you, President May, Commissioner Hanson. I know it's difficult when we're not looking at the same map. Are you referring to the potential north-south, the east-west collector?
Yes, I'm looking at pages 11 and 12 of the staff report.
Just let me get there quickly. Sorry.
You're doing fine.
Oh, okay. I see. Yes. So, the development is willing to dedicate the right-of-way required to provide those mid-mile collectors. The site plan has gone through several evolutions based on feedback from both the city and ACHD staff. I see where you're saying Harris and Brookline. Perhaps I will pass this over to either Adam Capel or Sabrina from Toll Brothers, because I believe they have had the most recent conversations with the city regarding the mid-mile collector positions, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Adam or Sabrina, are you able to address that?
Yes, this is Adam Capel, Toll Brothers, business address 3103 West Sherrill, Meridian, Idaho.
Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, President May, Commissioner Hanson. We were willing to do either. The preferred route after discussions with the city, the neighbors, and ACHD was to find a property line the road could be centered on just north. Again, we were happy to do either, but we believe that the alternative proposed route makes more long-term sense. I'll add to that, there are also a few new buildings going up that may not be shown in the aerial, and there's a large shop centered directly where the proposed east-west collector is shown right now. If you go just north, you can center it along a property line, which may be more beneficial, but again, we're happy to do it either way.
Yeah, I guess my point, thank you, is that you can still center it on that property line just north. We do see the shop designated on page 12 of the staff report, and then have the road turn to the south or curve to the south along what appears to be a natural line contour, and then hit your property as where it connects into a junction. My concern is that it might seem easy to just do it this way, shift responsibilities to some other landowner, and then they're stuck with it. And if they're not a party to this discussion, appears to be some sort of entitlement. And if there's a problem with that, we may have difficulty getting that connection made. So that's why these connections are typically best made when development occurs. And your property goes right on the mid-mile line. So it seems like the original, it's just the contour of the road. The road can function just fine. It doesn't have to be straight. In fact, it probably shouldn't be straight. It's going to a school.
Yeah, President May, Commissioner Hanson, I don't disagree with you. Again, we were just trying to do what best served the neighborhood and was at the request of the city and staff. Additionally, there is there's a sewer easement that runs through there that may serve as a dual easement for both the road and the sewer long term. But again, as the applicant, we're happy to do either. Our intent was absolutely not to pass the buck or restrict the future landowner or require any additional responsibilities to the north. We were just trying to do what seemed to be the most logical and the easiest for everyone at the time. And again, as Sonia added, this site plan's gone through dozens of iterations, particularly to try to accommodate the best road network throughout.
I have a follow-up question, if I may, President May. The question I have about the speed limit on Cedar Brook and the movement of pedestrians, especially to the clubhouse in the future. Mindy indicated that there was no other speed management or traffic calming measures that were going to be required. All five of us commissioners can testify to the fact that we get lots and lots and lots of requests from existing neighborhoods where speeds of cars exceed the posted limit. If we can anticipate those when the roads are being built at the very beginning, knowing there's a certain attractors in an area, and then requiring or the developer making sure that they speed management features, bulb outs, and not necessarily speed humps, but areas where it's just difficult, uncomfortable to drive in excess of the speed limit, are built at the outset, so that we don't have to come back. The burden is on the neighborhood later on to have to collect petitions, and then they may end up having to pay half of retrofitting something with speed management features when we could have required that at the outset. So my big concern, because Cedar Brook is now going to be seen as the principal east-west collector road that's going to head to that school, what kind of features are going to be planned in that area to ensure speeds stay at 25?
Thank you, President May. Commissioner Hanson, this is Sonia Delighted with Kittleson again. Commissioner Hanson, definitely understand your concern regarding the potential for higher speeds on the collector roadway. I will say this roadway does have several design features that have been incorporated in order to manage it. We do know it will be, at least within this development, the major connectivity route. But as you can see from the site plan that's on the screen right now, the roadway was laid out with curvilinear alignment. It's not a straight shot roadway. It does have curves in there that are appropriate for the design speed of the road. It is proposed to also be heavily landscaped. It will have sidewalks, and those streetscape treatments do a lot to change the context of the road and give cues to drivers about the type of facility they are on and how they should be driving it. The landscape median, in addition, while I recognize the comments about the lane width in that area, the landscape median is something that also gives those cues to drivers. All that being said, if there are particular treatments that you are or that you would like to see or are thinking about, would definitely appreciate hearing those, and we could have a conversation about how those may be included in the site plan.
Well, I just comment that under the HHC policies, there's a whole list of traffic calming or speed management features. I wonder whether we should look into, if in fact speeding occurs on this, we didn't anticipate it or didn't somehow require it. I'm not requiring a specific feature as much as you're the experts on designing and you understand design speed. Is to make sure it's designed for those people who are going to live there and walk back and forth. But that looks like an area that they're encouraging people to walk. There's pathway connections between streets. And of course, the big attractor right in the middle at the clubhouse and all the other features on Amity and Linda Road and the school. So there'll be a lot of walking and biking in that area. And so you don't want to have to come back later to put those in. And we need to, it's our job to anticipate that, because we already know it's going to cost the taxpayers a lot to have to retrofit it.
Thank you,
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Hanson.
Yeah, Commissioner oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying thank you. Go right ahead, Sonia.
Okay, thank you, President May. Yeah, Commissioner Hanson, agree, and we did look at the policy manual, and that is where the design of this road came from in terms of the curves that are incorporated into the road, the landscaping treatments, median, that sort of thing. So we care about those things as well, and do believe we've included elements that will support managing speeds in the design.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? No?
We do have people to comment.
Okay. Sonia, did you have any more that you wanted to add?
President May, I do not. Thank you much for your time, Commissioners, but would be happy to answer if any further questions come up through public testimony.
All right. Thank you very much.
So our first is David and Debbie Weiler.
Hi.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam President, members of the Commission. I'm happy that we have a chance to talk about this. As residents of neighbors to the south and southwest that I represent, Rock Ranch Estates and Stetson Estates. You need me to say my address? This is my first time.
If you would, please, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm Debbie Weiler, and my address is 4720 South Rock Ranch Lane in Meridian. We're in Rock Ranch Estates, and we've been working with our neighbors in Stetson Estates. We've worked quite extensively with the developer, and we've appreciated the things that they have taken into consideration as they've changed a bit of their plan. But we don't feel like it's quite there, and so we want to address that today. The statement that we've prepared, I'll go ahead and present that. Like many of our neighbors, we have enjoyed living in the more rural atmosphere found south of the interstate. As we have seen developments grow, we all knew and understood it was inevitable some of the land around us would be developed. It was therefore not a surprise when we learned that there was a proposed subdivision north of our property. What surprised us was the size. The original proposal, of course, was 365 homes to be developed on the 119 acres. As all the homes in the area are a minimum of 5 to 10 acres with beautiful estate homes, this was a dramatic change, and it was much greater than we anticipated. In our initial meeting with the developer, we became even more concerned as we saw the collector roads passing through our neighbors' property, cutting them off from their horses, and through our northern neighbors' newly constructed home. Fortunately, as has been discussed, that has been subsequently changed, but it still leaves a major need in this whole plan for more access points to this neighborhood. We were further agitated as the representative from the developer told us that the city had little interest in our concerns, as it was presumed that we would all be selling our properties to developers in the near future and leaving our homes anyway. As we all love this area, we have chosen to live in these homes and continue this rural lifestyle we have developed. We have become quite active in trying to at least mitigate the impact of this large subdivision coming in and giving voice to some very real concerns about the way the area is being developed. One of our concerns is, of course, the impact on traffic. In the staff report, it indicates that at peak hours, there are currently 235 vehicles on Linder Road. With the new proposed subdivision, it is anticipated that this will increase to 579 vehicles, a 247% increase in traffic. In listening to the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, one of the major concerns discussed was the traffic and impact on Linder Road. Rhonda McCarville, Ryan Fitzgerald, and Lisa Holland all spent time expressing this concern about the impact on traffic and questioning how this was going to be mitigated. The staff report discusses the impact on the intersections north and south. There is some discussion regarding the overall traffic and need for turn lanes and widening of the road. One of the areas that we did not see discussed specifically is that all of this increased traffic will have to pass through a single entrance and exit into this subdivision. From our understanding of the ACHD requirements, they have to request a variance to allow for this single entrance. During the peak AM and PM times, this will be a significant number of vehicles entering or exiting Linder from this point. Our biggest concern is this, and is shared by others. Others at the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting expressed the same concerns, and the concern of the hill that would block the view of the people exiting this neighborhood is a real concern. My husband and our 12-year-old son often run down Linder Road, and they're very familiar with this area and the grade there. My husband actually measured the reported 1,330 feet from Amity Road to where the single entrance will be located. This area clearly has limited visibility. When running, he moves to the side of the road as far as he can to watch closely for cars coming over the hill because they won't see him. And our son has expressed great sadness thinking about not being able to run near our home anymore because of this increase in traffic. I have significant concern that not only would we be looking at this variance to allow for 3,334 vehicle trips per day, as cited in the staff report, to use one neighborhood entrance, but this one entrance would be located at a place with limited visibility. We believe that by allowing this, a safety hazard would be created. In considering what options might be available to alleviate this, it is super challenging. In the Planning and Zoning meeting, the members questioned stop signs, stoplights, waiting until the road is improved as all potential options. And there was opinion expressed of wondering why the ACHD was not requiring something to be done to help control this issue.
Debbie, I'm sorry, you're going to, if you could wrap it up here in about the next.
Oh, well, I have 10 minutes, right? Because I'm representing our neighborhood.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No problem. So we understand that this is a really difficult problem to solve. And we figure that this is why the developer is asking to be allowed just one single entrance. The area south and west have homes and properties that are not easily accessed. The proposal has suggested a future connector via subdivision to the north and then west, but that would cross a neighbor's property and a private road. And in other meetings, this has been opposed by that neighbor and that neighborhood. I think the problem comes down to trying to place so many homes in an area where the schools, the roads, the infrastructure aren't in a position to support it. I believe the most obvious solution would be to limit the number of homes to a level where this single intersection and Linder Road could more reasonably handle the numbers. They reduced it by 35 homes, but we definitely think that a further reduction is needed in order to solve this issue. We would also question if having an entrance further from the base of the incline of that hill would be a safer position to allow for greater visibility for the traffic that will be created. We really hope that ACHD will take all of these points and the points that have been brought up by the commissioners so far in this meeting to determine the safest and most appropriate way to safely allow for the growth in this area. Sonia mentions that the development that they have proposed does not trigger the need for the planned road projects. And I would object to that and disagree. It absolutely triggers that need. And these planned road projects in the next, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever they are, that's not soon enough to accommodate this many homes in this rural area. And so we just hope that you will really strongly consider all of these things, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm sorry for the miscommunication there. Didn't realize you were representing the neighborhood.
No problem.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Yes, Madam President.
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
This is for Debbie. Debbie, I know you waved your magic wand and kind of said what you'd like to see happen, which is a reduction in the number of homes. But if that wasn't possible, what would your second wave of that wand include? I know that's kind of a tough question.
No, at the very least, there needs to be not just planned roads for these stubbed roads. I think it has to be in process. We have to have the infrastructure in place before we plan all of these homes. And we're just talking about one subdivision in our area right now. There are already multiple that have been approved, and I'm sure many more that will come down the line. We have to get ahead of this.
Debbie, you're absolutely right. Everybody in this room would agree with you. And then we'd have to show you our bank account balance for the next 20 years. We're about 15 years behind on that. So we're trying to work with what we got.
Yeah, and I understand. And so that's why I think if we don't have the money, then why are we approving these huge subdivisions when we don't have the infrastructure to support them? That's my question.
Yeah, the actual answer to that question is because of the property rights guaranteed under the Constitution that the current owners of any properties have. And you and I can discuss that sometime at length down the road, but we are absolutely unable by law to deny a plat based on that.
Okay.
Bad news,
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I mean, this is just a tragedy waiting to happen, to have one entrance and exit out of this huge subdivision.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Lisa Brady.
Hello, everybody. Lisa Brady, residing at 1506 North 12th Street, and excuse me.
Welcome, Lisa.
Good to see you all. This is such a great opportunity to take a good look at our bicycle facility matrix, which doesn't seem to be referred to in the planning document. So I would really like to see us have a conversation with the Bicycle Advisory Committee and also take a look at that facility matrix, which is sitting next to me here at my house. For my Safe Routes to School hat, I am always concerned when I hear the words curvilinear and heavy landscaping, which to me designates a couple things. Yes, it can slow traffic, but it also limits visibility for youth in these areas. And that I saw that at the school build over on 10 Mile Black Cat. I've driven around that site. It's a similar design, and it really makes my job, again, very hard for encouraging kids to be able to walk and bike. And I really hear the comments from Debbie about being able to get out there and do some exercise. Throughout this entire long meeting, I ran out my back door to run around on my patio to get some exercise. And, you know, the traffic counts that are being cited for the traffic on Linder are just for this project. And we know that it's going to continue to build out there. And I see the reference to our standard 5-lane arterial roadway. And we know that that's not a level 2 bike facility application anymore because of the speeds on those and the amount of traffic it carries. So I would just ask that we really do look further into the design and consider the facility matrix, and also that we look hard at what our future builds look like around schools. Curvy roads, heavy landscaping, it's just not safe enough for the kids out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? All right, hearing none, thank you. Stacy, do we have anyone else?
John Mooney.
John, welcome.
John Mooney, 7153 East Highland Valley Road. Thanks for the time. I just want to reiterate Lisa's comments. My issue, just listening on this from the beginning as well, is the Linder and Amity connections and how those are should be level 3 facilities in accordance with our matrix. And it doesn't look like those are accounted for. And I was a little disappointed to see in the project report bicycle facilities weren't really addressed in any of this. So basically, to further emphasize Lisa's points, we're dealing with the same thing. I serve as a neighborhood association president in District 1 in East Boise. And we have the same issues with an emerging Harris Ranch school. And this is the time to put in safe routes to school. It's not after the fact. And a protected facility of some sort would be wonderful for the kids that are going to live in this neighborhood to get to this future school site out to the west. So I know you've had a long meeting, and that's all I've got.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, the last person, I'm just asking for Julie Langlois. Dawn said that she might want to testify today, but I did not get a message.
Okay. I don't see her on.
Yes. So I do think that that is the end of the list.
All right. Thank you very much. Sonia, did you have anything you'd like to add after hearing some comments?
I don't believe there's anything left to address that I haven't mentioned already.
All right.
Appreciate the comments and the perspective. I will just say on the collector system, the developer is willing to do what everyone thinks is best in terms of where those collectors align. I think the challenge is that, we're getting conflicting ideas about what is best from different agencies. So they're willing to accommodate what the best approach is in order to make those mid-mile collectors work for ACHD.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mindy, did you have anything that you wanted to address before we move on?
Unless you have any questions.
Did anything come up that you would like to address or expand on?
President May, no, not unless you had any additional questions.
Okay.
Madam President, I have one quick one.
Okay.
For Mindy,
Commissioner Goldthorpe has one quick question.
It's a pop quiz for Mindy. What's a level 3 bicycle facility to kind of refresh my, okay. Oh, here comes Mr. Wallace.
The other Wallace.
The other Wallace.
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, Dave Wallace, Deputy Director of Plans and Projects. We have a matrix within our bike master plan, which lists the type of a bicycle facility which is appropriate for traffic in a given area. Level 3 is the highest consideration, and there are a number of treatments that would be considered for that.
Is that like what we did with Fairview this morning?
No, Fairview, Fairview's category 2 or 3. I'd have to look and see what the streets are. All right.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Any other questions?
Madam President?
Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question for Mr. Price. And that is, this is an annexation and rezone in which we are just a recommending body. And then it's for the preliminary plat, which we actually have more authority over. It's noticed on the agenda that it's, all three, but legally, could we just approve or recommend approval to the Meridian City Council of the annexation and rezone, and then refer the plat back to staff to, to deal with some of the issues that came up, but particularly with the mid-mile collector?
Madam President, Steve Price, General Counsel. Steve Price, General Counsel for Ada County Highway District, for the record. The question is, I believe you can most certainly hold your decision on the preliminary plat and make recommendations to the city on the rezone and annexation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. All right. Commissioners, we have a request for approval before us. Is there a motion?
I'll have a motion here just after I clarify what Steve just said. We can approve the first two, but defer the plat approval?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe someone's going to ask for that as a substitute motion then, but I'll have a motion here, and that is to approve the staff report, the annexation and everything we got here in front of us, with the exception of recommending, if that's the right way, or conditioning, probably is better, the multimodal facilities to level 3.
Well,
so we have a motion. Is there a second?
If I may, Madam President, I think what Commissioner Goldthorpe is saying is in terms of the recommendation on the annexation or comments, that your comment would be that you would recommend to the city that they consider level 3, our level 3 matrix bicycle facilities.
Absolutely, because this Linder, 10 Mile, Black Cat eventually, but some of the other north-south corridors are going to need to be really heavily used by bicyclists and pedestrians in order to keep congestion down.
I also think you need to refer the preliminary plat back to staff to work with the developer and the city of Meridian on some of the other issues that you've mentioned.
Yes, let's put that in there.
With that addition, I'll second the motion.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Goldthorpe, seconded by Commissioner Arnold. Discussion, Commissioner Baker.
yes, I'd ask Commissioner Goldthorpe if that includes reinstituting the mid-mile collector.
Sure.
Okay, that's fine then.
Okay. All right. So, commissioners, we have a motion before us. Any more discussion?
Yeah, I'll just.
Commissioner Hanson.
Thanks, Kent, for getting it all out. I wasn't too sure what.
It's always tough for me.
Slow and steady.
hard to understand. But I think we actually do need to protect our mid-mile collectors. I completely agree with Commissioner Baker on that. I have a great deal of heartburn over using local streets as a collector street. And I would encourage staff to, because we're so careful about including the master street map and the CIP, it really does show a glaring omission when there's no reference to an approved countywide master bike plan and the matrix that we have developed for it. So I think that needs to be a standard part of all of these so that we know this is a perfect area because the school is right there. We know people are going to be cycling, just as Commissioner Goldthorpe said. And so we need to know from day one, and everybody in the area needs to know from day one, what the bike routes and the pedestrian routes are and what levels that they will be built to, so that we know whether they're safe or whether they're for just the high-end cyclists.
All right, we have a motion for the second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you, commissioners.
And thank you, Mindy. All right, next item, Bicycle Advisory Committee bylaw modification. Ms. Inselman. We'll turn it over to you.
I don't see it on these. I did, and I pulled it down. Give me 1 second.
All right.
Give me 1 moment, Madam President.
You got it.
Appointments. There they are. There. Pause. Is this shared? Yeah, it is shared. Okay.
And thank you, Christy, ahead of time for all the work you've put in on this. Much appreciated.
Absolutely, Madam President. Just for you, though. So good afternoon, Madam President, Commissioners. The item before you is the proposed amendments to the Bicycle Advisory Committee bylaws. Amendments to the BAC bylaws are occasionally needed to clarify our process and overall membership needs. Over the next few slides, I'll briefly go through the proposed changes to the bylaws. Due to the interest shown from the public serving on the Bicycle Advisory Committee, as evidenced by the large number of applications received in January, the recommendation is to increase the membership from 10 members to 13. I apologize, I'm not coughing, my throat is just dry. Member attendance has been a concern. Another item would be member attendance. That has been a concern from staff as well as BAC. Therefore, it's appropriate to add additional measures to address those concerns. This includes the addition that if a member has 2 consecutive unexcused absences, they may be removed from the committee. Also, the recommendation is to reduce the maximum number of excused absences from 4 to 3 per year. The committee meets monthly, and currently as written, they could miss up to 25% of all meetings, and we would not like to encourage that.
Madam President?
Just one moment, Christy. Commissioner Baker?
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in on this. But theoretically, Christy, you could have 2 consecutive unexcused absences, and you could end up having, or even 1, and have 3 excused absences a year. So you could have 4 absences out of 12, which is a third, or you could even have 5 unexcused absences, and it just says a member may be removed. And I'm a little concerned about that because, as you pointed out, there are a lot of people who, want to be on this committee, and if somebody has that many absences, I don't think they should remain. In fact, I don't even know why it's consecutive. Why would it have to be consecutive? If you're missing up to 5 meetings out of 12, I mean, really, you're not really adding a lot of value to the committee.
Madam President, Commissioner Baker, these 2 items are actually in 2 separate sections of the bylaws. It wouldn't be a combination. It's not the intent of that. We do have an area where we talk about 2 consecutive unexcused. They may be removed. Further within the document, we do specify a total maximum excused absences to change from 4 to 3. So they could not exceed the 3 in 1 year.
Well, but you're saying there's 3 excused and 1 or 2 unexcused.
It's removal from the committee if they have 2 unexcused absences in a row. Overall, someone could not miss more than 3.
I understand what you're doing here. I am just saying, theoretically, somebody could have 2 unexcused absences that are not in a row, and 3 excused absences throughout the year, which adds up to 5, which means you're basically only there half the time.
Did you want to weigh in?
I have a statement. I'm sorry.
Madam President?
Go ahead.
Madam President, Commissioner Baker, while hypothetically, Dave Wallace, Deputy Director of Plans and Projects, hypothetically that is correct. That kind of bad behavior we haven't actually seen with the Bike Advisory Committee. So I think the intent on this is to set a standard to which it could be measured and have everyone recognize that that is the way that we'd expect the BAC to perform.
I have a question. Changing the wording from shall to may. Using the word may makes it a little bit more subjective. Then it kind of waters down the statement, I think.
Did we change that?
You're saying 2 consecutive unexcused absences and a member may be removed. So there's some subjectivity in there as to whether or not that would happen. So in my mind, that kind of waters it down a little bit.
Yeah, it does.
I think initially it said shall.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I think I would prefer to see it say shall. So otherwise, there's really nothing to compel. There's no compelling.
Thank you, President May. That's certainly, we can make that change if the commission would like us to make that change.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Dave.
Okay, so I'll continue. So the next item on this slide is recommended changes include clarification to who is notified when a member resigns or seeks appointment. The director or the staff designee and chairperson should be notified. Currently, the bylaws only say the chairperson should be notified. Excuse me. So there are a number of syntax corrections throughout the document being recommended. Other recommended changes include updating language to provide consistency and clarification on current procedure and responsibilities. We're also requesting language be added to clarify that ex officio members are not entitled to vote on items. Language has been added that reflects current procedure and public outreach efforts when seeking new members to serve on the BAC. Language has been recommended to be added that clarifies process and timing regarding member recommendations from the BAC to the Commission, the length of time for those outreach efforts, as well as the Commission's exclusive authority over appointments. And finally, the last article is recommended to be changed to clarify that the ACHD Commission holds exclusive authority to amend the BAC bylaws. A copy of the red lines were sent to ACHD legal staff for review and corrections. A clean copy of the recommended bylaws were provided in the online packet, and red line versions of staff and BAC recommendations were provided to the Commission. Staff recommends the Commission approve the amended bylaws as proposed by staff and legal, and I will stand for any questions.
Madam President, I have one.
Thank you, Christy. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Could you back off one slide, Christy?
Oh.
Whoops, next to the last one. That's it. The one about clarifying that the authority of the ACHD Commission. The committee itself would still bring proposed bylaws amendments to us, correct?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, yes. The BAC members could still, as they did with this process, could make recommendations to the Commission for changes, but it would be ultimately up to the Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commissioners or questions for Christy? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Christy. So commissioners, you have before you a request for approval and adoption of the modifications to the Bicycle Advisory
Lisa
Committee.
Brady would like to testify.
Okay. We will hold off on that. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you very much. Lisa Brady, residing at 1506 North 12th Street, Boise, Idaho. Currently, at your pleasure, serving as the chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. I wanted to say thank you both to the staff of ACHD and the commission for considering our amendment changes as well, or our amendments to the bylaws, as well as adding your own. The language clear up has been pretty good overall. I do see a lot of mentions of the director, so I'm looking forward to seeing the director at many more of our meetings, so that we know exactly what we're doing. Just to address the absences, you know, I think a lot of times bicyclists get this notion put to them that we're scofflaws, and I've never seen a more dedicated committee. It's a rare situation, usually something traumatic like what's going on with our good Vice Chair Ray Hubing, where somebody's not coming. And so I'd like to see that acknowledged, that it's a really rare occurrence that happens. And I appreciate the consideration given towards Ray at the time. That's my final statement on the general thought of the bylaws. Just as a quick notation, I look forward to working with Christy and the director and Deputy Director Wallace and any other ACHD staff in the future with the Bicycle Advisory Committee to make sure that the committee, all of us citizen volunteers, are actually heard in our bringing of the words of the people out there using the streets. And I just really look forward to serving at your leisure again. So thank you very much. And that's all I have to say today.
Well, and Lisa, thank you very much for your dedication to the advisory committee. Your efforts are much appreciated. And I think your reference to the individual that is taking a bit of time off, that would fall definitely under the excused absences, and you know, and that language was not done in any sort of punitive manner at all. It's just tightening things up. But again, thank you very much for your input.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker is Deanna. Deanna? Are you still with us?
I am still here.
All right. Good to see. Now we see you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, commissioners. I am a bit dismayed by the recommendations that are before you, because they appear to imply to me a desire on the part of ACHD to create a less independent advisory committee. I attend many of the committee's meetings, and over the past 5+ years, I've attended a majority of their meetings. I sat through several meetings this past year where they discussed and deliberated their recommendations to changes to these bylaws. And I really see little to none of their work in this final document. To me, this is at best an insult to this very dedicated, hardworking group of volunteers who committed their time and knowledge to this effort only to be ignored. ACHD prides itself on recognizing individual effort and dedication, and frankly, it shocked me to see this group so readily dismissed. I have read through both documents and consider them both to have valuable recommendations, but where was the collaboration between your staff and the committee? I see no evidence of that. I'm especially concerned about a couple of specific changes that to me lend this suggestion of a less independent committee. One is Article 7 for the recruitment, appointment, confirmation of members, Section C. I understand that this is a role the director should play, but I believe that these recommendations should come from the committee. They know what their gaps are in terms of geography, type of representation, experience, and knowledge. I am also concerned that the section, I can't find my reference to it right now. I seem to have lost it. Oh, here it is. Article, I'm not sure which number it is, but where it says the removal by ACHD Commission President, it seems to suggest that the President can just remove a member without reason. There's no statement in there. So I think it's fine to allow the President to recommend a removal, but it should state under what circumstances, and it doesn't clarify that. And I believe all of these reflect this possible change, and it really concerns me. It seems that why have an advisory committee at all if you're not looking for independent voice from these committees that you have? These three changes remove the independence from this committee and risk them becoming nothing more than an echo of what any director now or in the future and or commission president might want. And I just think that that's really dangerous for the commission, and I would hope that they would revise these to improve these changes to ensure going forward that this committee can still act independently and bring you the advice you need to hear. Genuine independent advice sometimes is not advice you might want to hear or you might agree with, but I think that is the value of having an advisory committee. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Deanna. I would disagree with you. I first met with Lisa Brady back in February, and we had quite a protracted discussion. We discussed all of the applications. Christy Inselman was there. I believe Brian Head was there, our chief of staff, and we've had several conversations. So I don't think by tightening up the structural language and the integrity of the operations as far as the excused absences go, I believe the pedestrian committee, I think they allow one unexcused absence or excused absence. So I don't think there's anything in here that really oversteps or in any way, shape, or form is punitive or demeans the members of the committee. I think they know that they're all appreciated. So I would have to respectfully disagree with your comments there. So I just would like to have that in the record. But I appreciate your input and your insight. Any other individuals like to speak? Any commissioners? Okay, thank you, Deanna and Lisa. So commissioners, you have before you a request for adoption of the Bicycle Advisory Committee bylaw modifications. Is there a motion?
Sure. Madam President, I move that we approve the changes to the Bicycle Advisory Committee bylaws.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Goldthorpe. Was that you, Commissioner Arnold?
Yes, it was.
Okay, a second from Commissioner Arnold. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a couple comments.
Okay, Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, I appreciate probably 60% of what's been presented in here. I'd like to echo some of Deanna's concerns. The purpose of advisory committee is to give us information from the best and the brightest out there, to encourage them. They're volunteering their time and their talent, their contacts, their experience. We want them to come in and challenge our assumptions, to challenge us if we're stuck. They need to be providing advice to the commissioners. And I really honor you, Commissioner May and Goldthorpe, for showing up and listening to those discussions, because in a much of what we hear, you hear many different sides. And listening to the discussions really helps us learn. And I've learned so much from them. They present new ideas, they bring in new information, and there are certain things that we have changed as a result of them pushing against us. It is a little troubling to see this being tightened down and controlled too much. I don't think there's the need for the director's control. There's 10 places in the bylaw amendments where the director is now being added as an additional step or an additional reference or an additional check. We get a lot of good advice from the director. That's his role. He gives us lots of information and lots of advice. We need independent advice and a sense of independence from the Bicycle Advisory Committee. I think it does need to be expanded. I think we need people with broader experiences. But of course, if in fact we don't respect the level of their independence and the value of their opinions, they'll vote with their feet. So how I vote probably doesn't matter. They'll decide whether in fact the information they give us is being useful or whether it's being dismissed. So I just want to extend a tremendous amount of appreciation for the amount of time and effort And this is not the first time where Bicycle Advisory Committee members or any of our advisory committee members have sat through very long hearings because their item was at the very end. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Commissioners, we have a motion before us. Is there any further discussion? Then I will call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye.
No.
Opposed? Commissioner Hanson, so noted. Okay. Thank you very much. Next is the Bicycle Advisory Committee appointments, request for approval. Ms. Inselman.
Okay. Madam President and Commissioners, this item before you is the proposed member appointments to the Bicycle Advisory Committee. Amendments to the BAC wrong one. To clarify, I didn't print out the right one. Okay, sorry about that. So we had two outgoing members, one resigned in December and one did not seek reappointment. With the amendments to the BAC bylaws to increase that membership from 10 to 13, we now have 5 open positions. In January, staff conducted a social media outreach on Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor, and the BAC website to solicit applications. Prospective members were directed to the BAC webpage where they could apply directly from the website. We also received emails directly to staff from interested individuals. A total of 16 applications were received. Those 16 applications were taken to the current BAC members on February 3rd. Those members reviewed the applications and voted for their top 5 selections. The slide shows their recommendations. This map represents the location of the existing BAC members in blue with the prospective members in red, or the opposite. Existing, sorry about that. The existing in red and the proposed in blue. This is a total list of the individuals who submitted applications. The number on that previous map correlates to the location number on the previous map. We did receive applications from all 5 districts within the county, which is great. This was the first time we did open up the application request to the entire county. Usually we were district specific, but this time we opened it up and got a great response. Staff reviewed the application, received NBAC's recommendation, and is recommending the following 5 individuals be appointed to the BAC, and that's Mary Beth Nutting from District 3 in Boise, Gary Larrigan from District 4 in Meridian, Morgan Cornwall from District 2 in Boise, Andrew Query in District 5 of Garden City, and Debbie Lombard Bloom from District 3 in Boise. This is going to give us some really great geographic equity on the BAC committee. This map just shows where those new members will be located. So staff is recommending you confirm the appointment of Mary Beth Nutting, Greg Larrigan, Morgan Cornwall, Andrew Query, and Debbie Lombard Bloom to the advisory committee, BAC advisory committee, and I will stand for any questions.
Could you go back and put the previous slide up, please? Thank you. You just zipped by it so fast.
Sorry.
I really want to get out of here. But
I haven't eaten lunch, so my fingers are going faster.
Oh, I know. I ate before. So, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, Madam President, I would move to confirm the appointments of the 5 members located on the screen.
I'm sorry, but Lisa Brady did ask to speak to this item.
Okay. All right. Hold that thought, Commissioner Baker. Lisa?
Sorry, team. Lisa Brady again, 1506 North 12th. I'll make it really quick. My argument against putting 5 new members on today goes back to our February meeting where we had a large discussion about the fact that this wasn't what we were looking at back in December, January. We were looking at adding 2 new members. And because we have a change in our bylaws today that allows us to go to 13 if necessary, my belief has always been that we should, yes, we have a lot of good people in front of us, that we should still keep it open for those additional 3. I just want to put that on record that I feel very strongly that there are more geographic representations that we should be looking at, including CUNA and including STAR, because of the massive growth that's happening out there. There are a couple of people that were on those applications that live closer to those areas, one of those being Pete Ritter. He lives closer. It's important to me to look at that. Commissioner Baker, we did talk about that during that meeting also. So I'll stand down, but I just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Madam President?
Yeah, just one moment, Commissioner Goldthorpe. What meeting are you referencing with Commissioner Baker?
That was the January ACHD meeting. We
okay.
started the whole bylaw discussion based on this particular.
And so this is probably a good time. And you and I discussed this in February.
That's
when
true.
we met. So you were well aware of the thought process here. In case anybody is wondering, and we tried to keep this as close. I think the staff did a good job to your list. Your top, your number 1 selection, that Tessa Greger, actually lives in Fort Collins, Colorado. The feeling was that we needed to have somebody, boots on the ground, somebody that didn't have to rely on flying in for a meeting, etc. So, and with so many applicants. And so I think we had that discussion as well. And then the second one, Jennifer Salmonson, as a council member in STAR, she really would have the capacity to be an ex officio. She would have to recuse herself. If you have a council member from STAR, you're going to end up with council people from other jurisdictions wanting to be on there, and then you end up with more of the makeup of a CICAC and less volunteer advisory committee. So we didn't want to take up another space with an elected official. So those 2 then, we picked up that staff looked at District 5. The only applicant there was that Andrew Query. And then there was another, Mary Beth Nutting came up, but the other 3 were your choices. So I think it's staff did a great job with compromising, going from the 10 to the 13th. It only increases your quorum by 1. So I think this is a very, very representative sample and going forward. And I think you'll have some really good input and discussions. And the bylaws do state that the members must live right here in Ada County. So, and we did discuss this, Lisa, in February when we met. So I just wanted to have that on the record. Okay, thank you. Deanna?
I have one question for, sorry.
Commissioner
One
Hanson, sorry.
question for Lisa, and I meant to ask it just a little earlier. I'm pretty impressed with the list and the experience of the folks who are being appointed. And one of the things that our Bicycle Advisory Committee member, John Mooney, pointed out on the testimony on the Cedar Brook project was the complete absence of an analysis on the bike master plan, in contrast to the analysis and the implication of the CIP and the master street map. So do you think any of these folks, plus the current folks who are staying on, would be able to move that off the dime so that we could actually start to see, since the bylaws specifically refer to our master plan, integrated into some of these proposals that come before us?
President May and Commissioner Hanson, I would certainly hope so. I can say that I personally know a couple of these new folks. I've seen them around and I've interacted with them somewhat in bicycle and transit agency stuff. So I think that there is an opportunity there for us. I'm not saying that any of these people are bad people in any way. my look is forward in the growth of our county. And so, yeah, we will do our best to bring that forward. And probably with more voices at the table, we might have an opportunity to do that just a little bit better.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Any other comments? Deanna, you would like to say something? Deanna Smith?
No, that was for the previous.
Oh, for the previous? Okay. All right. Any further comments? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Baker?
Yeah, Madam President, I move that we confirm the appointments of the 5 new members to the Bicycle Advisory Committee as detailed on the screen by the staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Sure, I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldthorpe. We have a motion by Commissioner Baker, second by Commissioner Goldthorpe. Any further discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Christy Anselman, thank you very much for all your hard work on this as well. Lisa, as always, we appreciate all your effort with the committee and look forward to continue working with you. And commissioners, thank you for all that you do. And ACHD team, thank you. This has been a long one. Oh, sorry. We've got to still have public comment. We haven't already exhausted that today. Sorry, I was moving too fast to get us on out of the
I
room.
do not have anybody
Have any?
signed up, but
Nobody?
making sure that
Make sure nobody.
nobody.
Okay.
Good.
All right, Stacy, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Be safe, stay well, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
That was definitely a long meeting.
Sure.